I thank Chair Waters. Thank you for the opportunity to present 5932, the Ensuring Chinese Debt Transparency Act this evening. Appreciate my colleagues' forbearance in this long day. I thank the Chairwoman for supporting this legislation coming to the committee tonight. What it does, it will ask the Secretary of the Treasury to instruct the U.S. Executive Director at each of our international financial institutions that U.S. policy should ensure greater transparency of Chinese government lending to countries that are beneficiaries at the World Bank or the IMF. Additionally, this bill would require the Secretary to report annually to Congress on the progress in advancing this policy and in lending to foreign countries by entities owned or controlled by the Chinese government. As we know, the IFIs, the international financial institutions, include the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the regional development banks. The IMF lends to foreign countries in order to resolve the balance of payments crises, while the development banks focus on financing projects around the world with an aim to eliminating poverty. With the growth of China's global presence, there's concern that the countries that borrow from Beijing will be overburdened, forcing them to be rescued by the IMF, or complicating the development bank's ability to underwrite quality loans for new projects. Specifically, China's Belt and Road Initiative is a specific and significant concern. The Belt and Road Initiative is a global development strategy adopted by the Chinese government in 2013, involving infrastructure development and investments in nearly 70 countries and international organizations in Asia, Europe, and in Africa. To date, the Belt and Road has committed more than $200 billion, with estimates that China may invest up to $1.3 trillion in Belt and Road by 2027, according to Morgan Stanley. Some estimates are near $400 billion already spent, and this dwarfs the World War II Marshall Plan of $130 billion in current dollars today. However, unlike the Marshall Plan, Belt and Road financing can make underwriting assistance difficult or even unworkable for third world countries, as the initiative has opaque financial terms. China simply doesn't report on this lending in any systematic way, and there's no evidence that China is adopting international transparency standards from the multilateral development banks. There's no effort on China's part to engage in best practices to prevent debt traps, corruption, or poor construction practices. China needs to be held accountable to ensure it's not taking advantage of vulnerable economies in these countries. In my view, the World Bank, the IMF, must know the terms and conditions of this opaque Chinese lending before they go to the World Bank or the IMF for assistance. This legislation will contribute to that accountability by seeking to secure greater transparency consistent with the requirements and principles of the Paris Club. The Paris Club is a group of global creditors, including the United States, who find workable solutions for nations currently in debt. In theory, many of the underlying policies in this legislation should already be practiced. However, due to political insensitivities, inertia, and other concerns, it just doesn't always happen. This legislation will underscore the United States leadership and help develop a global, multilateral effort to ensure more scrutiny for China. As China becomes a major creditor nation, it should be held to a high standard, which will be used to determine better outcomes on a global scale for borrowing countries. I urge my colleagues to vote for this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.